This is the Bush Whisperer coming from the most beautiful penguin sanctuary. What I want to talk to you about today is a continuation of language, the alphabet, and what the alphabet is and how it works. I'm supposed to gain some kind of an understanding of these basic principles. So we're going to start by actually dismantling the alphabet. We're going to use an example. So you look at the letter A. What is the letter A? The letter A is a triangle that is broken with the bottom open. It's the top part of the Merkaba. It's got to do with the flow of energy, life force. It's an old glyph. Then we've got the letter B. The letter B represents sort of like breasts, the nurturing element. The letter C represents the open cup of a hand, ready to receive, that can also hold water. The D is sort of like a spiral or an opening, but it's an opening that supports something by the nature of the opening. Then we have E. E is effectively a spiral relating to energy. That's the old spiral, the Celts used it. F. F has got to do with a suspender that has 2 points of suspension coming off it. It comes from an old Germanic rune. It relates to freedom. 2 that come from 1 moving in the same direction yet are independent of each other. So it relates to the will, and to the freedom of the will. G. G is a great spiral that has a point or an ending. And it relates to how the cosmic reality becomes finite, from infinite to finite. H. H is an interesting one, because H is, it's an opening, but it's not a spiral. And it's a spiral that is amidst a unit of suspension. Sort of like a window in a wall that becomes a door, but isn't a door. And so is representative of a place that you can go into, that can contain. I has got to do with the point from which all of this comes, as in the interior from which all of this comes, inside. We should use more examples for the words. J. J is a spiral, but it is a spiral representing the finality of that I, from whence things comes. So it represents the outside as the process of coming from the inside to the outside, delineating the barrier. K. K is interesting. K represents the bouncing or the refraction. And its refraction is if you've got the hand resisting something. It'll bounce off your hand. So it has a two-way relation of the way in which energy can be redirected. Very much to do with transmutation. L. L is a particularly interesting one. L is when we change direction. And changing direction has got to do with the continuity of transforming in alignment with the surroundings. So it's the way in which things turn. Represents the fundamental turning of things. M. M represents the movement of water, how water moves. N represents the ending of the movement of water, the broken movement. O. O is the circle that contains all of this. P. P is a suspender that suspends something, like a pole that has some kind of a fundamental opening or something being represented upon this pole. Q. Q is an interesting one. It's a container through which water can flow. Flowing water that can flow through a container of sorts. R. R is a very fascinating one because R represents the rolling sensation. And it's got to do with the rolling of the tongue, which represents how the head can roll, the rolling of the head. And so it's quite instrumental to the thinking process in terms of its hieroglyphic ancient counterpart. S represents a serpent. Serpent represents the intelligence of energy and how energy is fundamentally intelligent, the intelligence of chi or life force. T represents a crossing. It's the cross. It also represents Saturn and suffering and all of these elements. U is when something is cupping something else, but from the bottom, supporting something from underneath. And so one can look up or one can be under. Fundamental, how the meanings of the letters become the meanings of the words related to the numbers that they represent or are represented through them. V represents an opening that goes into the earth, the way that water would fall. Gravity as well is an element of V. W represents where the life force results, where it goes, where it ends, and is very much related to the process of the manifesting reality, almost like an inverted M in a way, in a sense. And so we look at W as a very fascinating letter because it has a lot to do with the actualization. X is the cross, but it's the spinning cross, specifically the cross that is spinning, representing the chakra and the movement of things. Hence, excitement. Exciting principle is the spin of the energy that produces this excitement. Y is a particularly interesting one. Y represents incomplete spirals, two of them, that's in a sense of polarity, that have a finite element, so they're not full spirals, they're not actual circles containing different spheres. And the polarity denotes time. It's got to do with the past and looking towards the past or from the past. The way in which time flows is a polarized system, coming in of itself, moving in two directions. And Z is to do with change of octave, shift of vibrational frequency, a movement from one energy vortex system into another in terms of the rate of vibration and the resonant field. So we've got a little idea of what we can consider the alphabet as. And to understand why words are important and why it matters which words are used according to the meaning is to realize that every alphabetical letter has a meaning in itself. And when you combine these letters, they produce particular meanings which are complex. And so these particular complex meanings are sort of like the way in which a sentence reflects meaning, different to a word reflects meaning. Though the words used are what produce the sentence. In the same way the letters used are what produce the meanings of the words. And so we can't use words in an abstract form, deciding what our inner perceptive idea of the word is, based on our own ideas. There has to be a basic currency of knowledge and understanding of how these principles work. In order to be able to fully understand the meaning of a word, one wants to be able to understand the principles being the letters that construct this word, sort of like the parts of a house that construct the house, so that we can gain an understanding of what kind of a dwelling this is. And this gives us an insight into the meaning of the word on a more esoteric and occult level. So this is why doublespeak has been used in order to confuse minds and take the information from the esoteric and occult side of things away from us, producing an ignorant form of rote. And rote has become a particular habit in this day and age because people have forgotten how to think for themselves. They've forgotten how to understand the meanings of things in their most fundamental basic states. And it's sort of like memorizing the meaning of a sentence without actually knowing the meanings of the words that make up that sentence. It would be very, very confusing for one, to be able to understand what's really being said in a communication environment. And we've got sort of a microcosm of this principle happening when people are misunderstanding the meanings of words and using words in their incorrect form. I recently did a video about the difference between ego and persona. And here is an illustration, a continuation of that video, if you will, so that one can gain an abstract understanding of these principles as they actualize. And this will give us some kind of knowledge if we are to use and understand these principles and build upon them, and to contemplate these letters deeply, to sit in very deep meditation, to gain a fundamental realization of these principles as archetypes, what they mean, where they come from, how they are connected to each other. Y is connected to E, is connected to A. And A is sort of like where all of these principles come from. And M is the movement between all of these principles, if you want to get right down to it. And S is the principle of the intelligence that connects all of these elements through the process of movement to the first principle. And so they're all expressions of one basic fundamental reality. And this reality is understood in terms of its parts, though the sum of the parts is indeed greater. No, the totality of the parts, the sum of the parts, are not the same, shall we say. And when we consider everything working as a single whole, it becomes a new thing. And this is the principle of personification, the way in which the human consciousness tends to anthropomorphize. And so there's a hidden meaning behind the meaning of the meaning. And as we delve deeper into the hidden meaning behind the meaning of the meaning, we start to gain very abstract understanding, which is a conceptual way of looking at things without pinning down the symbols. I've given you a small down pinning of the symbols, but as we meditate on these symbols and contemplate them more deeply, the understanding of this language will become far more profound. And so this language situation needs to really be grasped for us to be able to think with open minds, and for us to be able to avoid the pitfalls of cognitive dissidence, which so often tends to become a habit in many people. Because they've read a book somewhere and they read what was written down, they believe it to be the fact. And we were taught in school that these books have got all of the truths in them, and that what we can read written by another scholar becomes a fact of what it is. And I've seen this with etymology, very, very sadly. A conversation recently about the source of the word shaman is an example, where someone wrote in the 1800s or the 1700s that the word shramana has got no connection to the word shaman, because some etymologist, a fringe etymologist somewhere, decided that that was the case. When you look at the word shramana, it is actually, what is it, about 2,700 years old. And this word is from the Rig Vedas. And no, not the Rig Vedas, it's from the Upanishads. And it means that one that uses devotional music and of the dambaru, of the drum, to enter into a trance, to produce healing for the self and the community, chanting sacred songs and such. And so we can see that the word shramana, or pronounced shramana, is truly the same word as shaman, but used thousands of years before the word shaman, which is now being denoted to some group of Siberian people, which has got a very modern language, which grew out of other languages that were mixed with the Indo-European languages as that language moved through Europe, and got a lot of the flavor of Sanskrit into the language, as all other languages got the flavor of Sanskrit into the languages, because the Indo-European was fundamental in the center of the world, if you would, and many of the cultural dictates moved through the sphere. So we can understand that to really understand the meaning of words, we need to look way, 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 way back into the annals of history, and we can't believe what's been written down. as hypotheses, because many of these concepts are pure hypotheses by people that didn't really know what they were talking about, but wrote it down as if it were fact. And so we need to question everything. Even the set of symbols that I've given you, you should question it. Question it for yourself and figure it out. Gain a personalized understanding of it too, so that you can test it the way a physicist tests theorems, or a mathematician tests theorems, in order to gain some kind of a profound, deeper understanding of the principles at work. So I'm going to leave you with a few words. So much love. Enjoy the day. God bless you and be well.